The Veteran Lived Experience series features personal conversations with veterans who have agreed to share their story on topics prevalent in the veteran community. Veterans are joined in discussion by professional experts and members of the Veterans Health and Wellness Foundation team.
This is the Veterans Lived Experience series. One of the topics that we're doing today is called transition, and we have several guests with us to speak to that in terms of what their time was like in the military and towards the end, and then how they made that transition, where they are now, and speak to you all about any of the difficulties they had in doing that. The purpose of this is to facilitate the transition of others so that you can hear about the various experiences and apply those in your situation, and hopefully that will be helpful. Most of all of the guests today are male, so this is only part one. We will be doing additional sessions on transition later because we do recognize that there are significant differences on occasion from those of the male veteran to the female veteran. So we will indeed cover that a little bit more as we move forward. So with that, knowing that there are about 250,000 or so veterans who make that transition every year, we know that quite a few of them have a number of difficulties in going from one side of the fence to the other. There are a number of tools out there to help. We all probably know of TAPS, a program sponsored by the VA that's out there. There are a number of different websites and other organizations that offer assistance in doing that. But it's not always easy to find, navigate, or apply to your situation, which is why that's really one of the reasons why we're doing the Veteran Lived Experience transition series, if you will. And so I'll have my guests each introduce themselves. As I mentioned, they will talk a little bit about their military experience, and then we'll get back into their transition with the ability to ask questions and what have you throughout the webinar. So with that, if I can ask Mr. Coons, if he would get started for me and tell everyone here a little bit about who you are, that military experience, and then we will come back to you and sort of tie in that whole transition piece.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you having me. Um, so I kind of joined the military on a whim, played a little bit of college basketball, um, was kind of trying to find my way. And I used to meet with my grandfather for breakfast every Tuesday, and he's like, "Hey, have you ever thought about joining the military? You're really athletic." And, no one in our family's been in the military except for your grandfather. With that being said, I was down at the strip mall looking at the Air Force, Army. I was looking at the uh, all the different branches, and I was gone. I was in basic training in 2 weeks after that, and then was in the Army for about a year, and then 9/11 happened. So I spent about 18 months in Baghdad, output, came out of the military in Enid, Oklahoma, of all places. Um, Had a great mentor in the business that I'm in right now, and I've been in my business for 19 years as of December 1st this year. And I've owned my business since 2013 as an independent financial advisor for every A-rated carrier that's out there. So I currently have about 300 million under management, and I do retirement planning and some insurance facets and components as well. And I've been featured in Forbes magazine, Think Advisor, Annuity.com. So it's been a great career for me. And I'm very blessed and thankful to have served. I think it's attributed very well for what I do, and there's a lot of qualities that I've inherited that have transitioned very well from my career field.
Thank you. Mr. White, Fred White.
All right, good morning, everyone. So my name's Fred. I joined the military in January 2001, so 9 months before 9/11. I started out as a Cab Scout in 2nd ACR. After my first deployment to Iraq in 2003, I came back and I went off to Warrant Officer Candidate School, where I became a pilot and flew UH-60s for the remainder of my career, which ended in 2013. I got out and I went into business operations, manufacturing operations management. and I'm currently the operations manager for an aerospace company called Chromalloy. And I can't begin to talk about how beneficial my background in the military served me in my transition. One of the things that I think Eric mentioned that played well into my scenario is when I transitioned out, I was able to find a prior service mentor that was in my industry that helped me with that transition and turning into the civilian market. So.
Well, thank you. Mr. Sims.
Yeah, you caught me off guard, ma'am. So I didn't think you were gonna have me on this panel. I'd have told you no yesterday.
I know that. That's why we.
Yeah, because she knows this is my last day. So, Tyrone Sims II, I'm a 2000 West Point grad. Like Fred and Coombs here, I'm also a member of the regiment, 1st Squadron, 2nd ACR. Served in Iraq, May 03, July 4th. Coombs actually had the honor of serving in my platoon. Go Regulators. I got out 05, went straight into politics, have been writing and leading national security defense vet mil fan policy for multiple Democratic presidents. And now I'm getting ready to transition over to being the chief of staff for Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee out of Texas' 18th Congressional District.
Thank you. Mr. Estep Morris.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Lewis. Like Eric and everyone else here, I'm a 2nd ACR guy as well, 1-2 ACR Bull Troop. And I joined about a year prior to 9/11 as well. Deployed with the regiment, came back, did all of the milestones like my peers did. And then probably about my 8th year of service is when the Army decided I would serve it better with a career functional designation. So I went into the quantitative side. So the Army employs specialized staff officers, and from that moment on, probably about 2009 or so, to my retirement, I was what was called an ORSA, an FA 49. So was responsible for the quantitative and qualitative aspects of providing additional information and data to decision makers at division and above. And so I served in a number of different positions that probably helped me transitioning out into the civilian world, because not only was I a green suiter during that time and had interactions with other green suiters, but also we interacted with a lot of the GS civilians and then contractors as well. And so that started that transition. I then transitioned to the Texas Army National Guard, where I was the chief of analytics for the division, 36 ID. And then at the same time, I transitioned into the financial and banking industry, which really appreciates all the data and analytics that the Army sent me to school for on their dime. And now these banks are using to their full benefit. So I was in San Antonio for 4 years working at USAA, and now I'm here in Little Rock working for Simmons Bank. And official retirement is now 01 March 2022. So I've only got a month and a couple of wake ups before I'm done.
Well, great, thank you for that. We have one other guest, Matthew Lewis, and he's a friend and colleague, and who actually is sort of on both sides of this fence. He military, retired, but he also now facilitates transitions for other veterans. And so I was happy that he was able to join us, because he can provide a lot of insights to our discussion as we move forward. But right now, just have him tell you a little bit about who he is, his military experience, and then we'll begin with some other additional information.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Lewis, and apologies for being a couple minutes late. Pleasure to be here today. Briefly, class of 1991, West Point, armor, so a lot of similarities or familiarity with some of the experience of the individuals on the call. Used grad school as my transition vehicle, went on, cut my teeth in the corporate world, places like General Electric, Procter & Gamble. Spent a better part of the past 18 years at Deloitte, retired from Deloitte last fall, joined as president of a startup called PurePost. We're a veteran-run public benefits organization. We're out to disrupt the talent matching industry. We can talk more about that later. My real personal passion and reason for being here today is around my focus of eliminating the civil-military divide in the country. Doing that through 3 channels of work. The first of which, you can see my book over my shoulder, I'll hold it up. Mission Transition, practical guide helping our service members matriculate into full employment career fields of their choosing. Most awarded book of its kind. Auspicious day today because it's being released in paperback after having sold out of the hardback run. Second leg of that stool is helping our corporate leaders understand who veterans are and how to build programs to successfully bring on that talent and the skills that we know reside within them. And then the third leg of the stool is helping fill the gap in what I'll term a lack of a warm handoff between the last duty station and the community into which they settle. At the moment, there's one of 45,000 veteran services organizations trying to fill that gap, but little of that support is coordinated and provided at a point, time, place that makes sense for the transitioning veteran and their family. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Great, thank you very much. So as you can see, there's a number of different types of experiences here. But one thing that's in common is it appears as though most of the folks who we're speaking with today had a relatively smooth transition from active duty to veteran status. And so want to hear a little bit more about that so that those who are out there who may be having a bit more difficulty can perhaps get some tips and pointers from what folks in their shoes have done or are doing. Because as we heard, Morris, Mr. Estep, only has a few more, as he mentioned, wake ups before he's on the other side of the fence. So Fred, you told us a little bit about your military experience and then transitioned to a little bit about what you're doing now. But can you tell us a little bit more about how that actually happened? What were the things that you did from when you knew you were getting ready to get out, or even when you began to have that thought of when you wanted to leave? How did you begin preparing for that transition? And was that transition smooth, or did it go according to the plans that you had made?
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. So I started planning for my transition about 9 months before my separation date. And probably like most people transitioning, I had no idea what I was going to do, where I was going to go, how I was going to go about it. And so it started with creating kind of getting into the civilian social media aspect as far as getting onto LinkedIn, transferring my military experiences to its civilian counterparts, and starting to understand the market that was out there. Along with that, understanding exactly what I needed personally to transition financially. You know, where did I need to be financially in order to support my family, pay my rent, pay my health insurance, and do all those things that you kind of take for granted sometimes when the government's picking up the tab. From there, it was getting my name out there, getting resumes out there, connecting with headhunters, connecting with recruiters, and I probably had 40 to 50 interviews before I finally got a yes. And from there, it was understanding what that transition would be like, feeling comfortable in the role that I'd be going into. Like I mentioned, my boss at that time and my mentor was a veteran. So he understood the transition. He understood a lot of the questions that I had as far as my peer group had been doing what they were doing for the past 15 years. And I was coming in still trying to learn the lingo, learn everything that I didn't pick up in those 15 years while being in the military. So.
Yeah, what's interesting is that you mentioned mentor, and I believe it was Eric who mentioned a mentor also. How did you come upon this mentor that you're mentioning? Was it a relationship that you already had? Was it someone you met once you did get out? And then how did it come to be that they were so instrumental in helping you get to where you are?
So it was somebody that I met when I was coming out. He actually interviewed me, and then we kind of struck up a friendship from there. And really what he did for me was want to explain the nuts and bolts of what I was going to be doing. But when I had a rough day, when I had those moments where, why are we doing it this way? In the military, we did it like this. I could go to him, we could sit one-on-one, go grab lunch, have coffee, and discuss the challenges that I was experiencing, the questions that I had. If I wasn't where I needed to be as far as my understanding level, he took the time to sit down with me, explain the business side of what I was missing, and then kind of bring me up to speed to where I needed to be. And a lot of it was just spending time and creating that relationship.
Okay. And as I mentioned, Eric, you also mentioned mentor. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah. With me, it was, segueing into that, I knew that I didn't want to work hourly wages. Now, I didn't want a glass ceiling on my earnings potential or my advancement potential or anything I did, but going into the field that I'm in, I work for a captive brokerage firm where I, head, in my field, and I'm sure Morris can attest this too, the turnover is extremely high. I think the success rate is less than 9%, make it past the first year in what I do. But I had a gentleman from Bangladesh who had 30 years of industry experience. And I think that, my appearance coming out of the military, being squared away, walking in and, even if it was a Burlington coat factory suit at the time, it was nice and tailored, and I walked in and was in good shape. And, I knew that I was working 100% commission, and I really engulfed and digested everything, that the gentleman shared with me, especially over his 30 years of industry experience, because it was instrumental to my success. And this was, at the time, I felt like I was still in the military while I was working with him, because he gave me assignments, homework every night. You're going to meet with client XYZ tomorrow. I need you to be prepared for this. You're going to handle this part of the presentation. You're going to work on the closing today. You're going to work on different facets. So that was, if I didn't have a great mentor, I don't know if I'd be here talking to you today.
Thank you. So Matt, with the work that you do now in terms of helping to facilitate that transition, talk a little bit about the importance of mentors and how someone is transitioning can find one. It seems as though Fred and Eric were quite fortunate with the folks that they had working side by side with them, but we know that that's not always the case. And so can you comment a little bit more about what that looks like, how one could potentially begin to look for a mentor, nurture a relationship that would become a mentorship, because that is obviously a very important step in this transition.
Sure, happy to. And I would start by saying that really two key factors that tend to enable successful transition into corporate entities, one of which we've just hit on around mentoring. The other is engagement with a community that normally takes the form of what we'll call a business resource group, an employee resource group. An entity that enables you to find your tribe within your new culture, within your new enterprise. Specifically on the mentoring front, in terms of finding one, as you're making your transition, there's a number of programs out there. Veterati is one I'll throw out. That's kind of a peer set peer-to-peer mentoring structure, those that have been in the corporate world, but it's more on a one-on-one basis. There are others, American Corporate Partners is a little more organized, where corporate entities have relationships with ACP, and they'll have individuals kind of cover down on the usually veterans coming out that require a mentor. So those are two. Within each entity, there tends to be programs as well on an individual basis once you get in your organization. In terms of ordering it, once you've made the transition into the organization, I would first seek out your peer set, that veteran business resource group and employee resource group. Get connected with that local tribe, because they're going to help you understand and learn the ropes of the place, help you understand the culture, the nuances, how things get done. And then once having understand that appreciation, understanding, they'll also typically have connections with the mentoring program within that organization. So I would follow that engagement with the peer set, your tribe, BRG, with the mentoring program within the enterprise that you join.
So again, that sort of puts someone in a place where they have a position, and then they can look at that group within the structure of the company that they've joined. Do you have any sort of more definitive suggestions for someone who hasn't gotten to that place yet? Someone who's coming out who really doesn't have much concept of what it is they are looking to do or how to go about that.
Right. So this is where, specifically in terms of mentoring, I would take advantages of groups like Veterati or American Corporate Partners.
Okay.
Those are two to which you'd have access. The other thing that, since you mentioned it, and since I happen to be president of the organization, go out and complete a free passport profile. It's an online, digitized, translated, civilian-ready, Ivy League tailored profile. I hesitate to use the word resume, although you can upload, download it, use it to your heart's content any way you want for free for life. What that will do in terms of, as part of translating what you've done, and it does the translation automatically, is identify for you, by way of instantaneously matching you to one of 3 million jobs coming through the National Labor Exchange every day, give you a sense of what roles you might be a fit for that you perhaps hadn't even considered before.
Great. Well, thank you. And that resource that Matt just mentioned is in the box here, so that you have all of that information, all the links to those things that he's talking about. Tyrone, in along the same lines of mentorship, what was your experience like with that, and did you make use of one in your transition?
Mine's a little different. Hindsight 2020. With Fred and Eric's. I thought I had mentors, really didn't. My line of business, kind of found out there's a lot of selfishness going on in politics. And so I thought I was built to get mentors. I generally define a mentor as someone like my parents or grandparents' generation who can provide me insight and so forth. But I've had to create paths both for myself and for others. So I've either have been serving as a mentor, or to one of the points Matt made a little while ago, I've actually been leading the effort in like creating that tribe. In this case, for me, it's the veterans who are involved in Democratic politics, which didn't really exist until after the 04 Kerry campaign. So for me, it's kind of taking the lessons learned and creating an environment so that folks who are looking to do what I do in some capacity or another aren't having to experience the experiences that I had to experience nearly 20 years ago.
Okay, thank you. Morris, do you have any thoughts about this?
Yeah, just a couple. For me, I didn't have a mentor per se. And so what I did have was a network that I utilized. When I decided to leave the active duty side, it really was invaluable for pushing me forward and talking with me about the skill sets. I certainly advocate for anything that will help you translate your military skill sets into civilian lingo. That's one of the major hurdles, because a lot of the civilian employers out there don't necessarily have a good understanding about all the aspects that we are involved in military side of the house. Leadership is something that all employers are looking for. They just don't know how it translates from the military side to the civilian side, right? You can't use your knife hand to give orders in the civilian side. You got to use those 7 soft skill powers, right? And so I would advocate for you using that network, whether it be through Facebook, preferably LinkedIn, to make those contacts. A lot of the positions that are advertised are not necessarily viewed by individuals across the country on your particular company's website. And so you're going to find out about it through LinkedIn or otherwise. And then I'm an advocate at USAA. We had it at Simmons. We have it the BRG, the Business Resource Group for Veterans. That is another way in which you can go and seek out mentors or just talk with people about their experiences, right? You don't want to become isolated during your transition period and feel as though you're the only one that is experiencing this. I think that's the point of the mentorship more than anything else. Other people have done it and you can do the same thing.
Okay, thank you. Eric, why don't you tell us a little bit more now about your actual transition? Yours is a bit different in that you were more in the entrepreneurial environment of what you wanted to do. You knew that from the start. And as we all know, that entrepreneurship can be a difficult path in and of itself. So tell us a little bit about how you went from your role in the military to what you do now, and what things that you think made it most successful.
Yeah, you know, and it's funny, truth be told, my first wife was Air Force, I was Army, and you know, I probably would have stayed in, but she had orders elsewhere. So, you know, I took full advantage of, you know, and I say this, and you know, I was very fortunate to come out of the military when I did. A lot of my friends went continue to go to Afghanistan, and you know, I had come out of Baghdad, then Al Quds, and I utilized my block leave to my full advantage. I mean, I started to gather, and there wasn't, you know, the internet was just really surfacing at that time. I mean, I wasn't familiar with LinkedIn. I think I was looking at local papers for jobs at the time. But I mean, I took full advantage of my block leave, and I knew that, you know, from personal experience with my grandfather being a banker and being in the healthcare field and losing my dad at an early age to multiple sclerosis, and, you know, not planning financially for the future. And I started to really dig into financial literacy at that time too, because, you know, that's another component that's lacking not only in high schools, but in the military, I feel as well, you know, financial literacy and actually preparing yourself and having somewhat of a nest egg to come out, especially in the career field that I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to work, you know, not your typical 9 to 5. I didn't want to work hourly. I didn't want to work salary. I didn't want a glass ceiling to anything that I could do. So, you know, and in my field, businesses are always hiring. They're looking for someone that has the qualities that we have when we come out of the military. I mean, you know, we're in shape, we're detail oriented, we're on time. And truth be told, probably 30 to 40% of my clients are former military. So my transition was, I mean, I thank God every day, but it was seamless. I couldn't have chosen a better career field or career path to do than what I'm in right now. And you know, the first 6 months are very intimidating, whether it be through social media or you know, just in passing on a daily basis. But for what I do, the transition could not have been any better. And the qualities that I inherited in the military and applying those, I still apply those same things every day.
Okay. Tyrone, in your transition, again, we talked a little bit about mentorship, et cetera, and you mentioned in terms of the career field in which you looked at and wanted to dive into, it was a bit more difficult landing one of them because of the environment. But did you decide, that was the field that you wanted to do long before your transition period? Was it something that happened while you were in the military, or were you influenced by someone in particular? What made that field come into focus for you?
So I'd say Baghdad, ma'am. My transition really began November of '03, even though we deployed in May of that year. I made a determination for several reasons, primarily because I fell in love with what I was doing, the whole civil military aspect of building community through the vision of the people living in those communities. And I just fell in love with that, but I knew that that was a flash in the pan with respect to what my Army career would continue to have been if I would have stayed in active duty, knowing that I would have deployed again and again. So once I had made that decision that that's what I wanted to do, I began doing research, knowing that I wanted to return home, living in Northern Virginia, deciding which jurisdiction to live in that would be more suitable to my political activity, which is why I chose to live where I live, which obviously has been beneficial to you, ma'am, because I've been able to pick you up a lot. But then also, to the point, the question you're asking, Coons, once I, got home and, during like the redeployment leave or whatever you call that, trying to find those people who I needed to talk to and reaching out to, like my coach, who's a 79 grad who had a couple of friends / acquaintances who kind of delved in this world from a financial perspective and making those connections and just connecting dots. And as doors were presented or creaked open, going to those doors and going through them and just making a way as I kept going. But also allowing room for adjustment, recognizing that every op board is thrown out the window as soon as you cross the first phase line. So never allowing myself to get too stuck on a plan, recognizing that every perfect plan is never perfectly executed. So, for me, the transition in of itself wasn't bad. It's more of, if you could have done it a different way, knowing what you know now, then I would have done some things different, but I technically like where I am, so I have no real complaints.
That sounds interesting in terms of how that worked out. Matt, it looks like you were getting ready to say something. Sure.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you didn't mind if I interjected a point, because these stories illustrate what I think is very important for individuals that are pondering a transition, which is to the extent that the transitioning service member can actually get boots on the ground to prove or disprove the hypothesis that they may have about a career fit, the better. And the good news is that there are many more options to do that today than when I came through. I recognize, just a quick story about my own transition, I recognize that I did not have the skill sets I needed to be successful in a corporate environment. So I saw graduate school as a vehicle that enabled me 2 years full-time to upskill, 1, 2, to rub elbows with peers that had already been working in the outside world. And so I'd be able to glean some lessons learned from them as well. As part of that, in between years 1 and 2, there's an internship. And again, back to my point around my hypothesis, I had a career hypothesis at the time that I wanted to work in the automotive field. And so I interned at a General Motors plant, and literally within the first 48 hours, I discovered this is not where I want to be. I won't get into the whys and the wherefores. So in that sense, it was a bit of a failed internship. But on the other hand, for me, I saw that as success because I could discount one career option and point myself in a direction that was a better fit for me without having to commit full time and without having a false start in a career. And so there are options out there today, such as Hiring Our Heroes, such as SkillBridge, and others like them, please take advantage of those programs within your last 6 months of leaving active duty to prove or disprove whatever your career hypothesis is. If it works out, great, great. If it ends in failure like mine, that's success too, because that'll prevent you from falling on your face in that career field should you have transitioned directly to it.
Thanks for that. Were there any, and this question is for anybody out there, were there any particular, I guess, moments in time during the transition that you felt like the military needed to provide more? We are all probably familiar with TAPS, that program that we're supposed to all go through at the end or towards the end of our careers in the military. And it's typically a one-day thing, and it covers a variety of topics. But it's in terms of information, it's kind of like drinking from the fire hose, if you will, because they do give you tons of information. But the question is, did you all at any point find that helpful in terms of your transition out into the civilian world? Eric, I'll just start with you.
You know, I mean, we're talking 2004, so it was very difficult. It's very difficult to remember back then. I feel like there could have been more, but times have changed drastically as well, especially with social media, especially with the internet, with the resources that are available, whether it be LinkedIn or your Facebook groups. I mean, anytime I open up social media right now, it seems like there's job opportunities in abundance. But, you know, truthfully speaking, I don't think that I picked up too much benefit from that component at the time.
So to kind of piggyback off what Eric was saying, so I went through it, I want to say January, February 2013, so a little bit more recent. But Dr. Luce, like I said, it was a one-day event. By the time I went through TAPS, I had already found my job. So I think the TAPS program would probably be more beneficial the earlier it started in the transition. But the things that they were teaching in there were very rudimentary, and they were a little outdated as far as keeping up with social media, translating your military experience to civilian, and actually making the connections, because that's really where it's at, right? Is making the connections with companies and the hiring people. And I can tell you right now in my current role, I have, you know, a couple bases around me, and I have open jobs, and I can't get the people at TAPS to return my phone call. You know, I'm saying, hey, I have these jobs. I have the technical positions that I know transitioning service members would be great for, but I can't make that connection with them because they won't call me back. So I think there's a little bit more that they can do with connecting to the actual civilian workforce.
Hey, Fred, what installation is that?
I have Fallon Naval Air Station and Travis Air Force Base.
Was you San Antonio?
No, this is Travis out in California and Fallon in Nevada.
Okay, gotcha.
Matt, you have any sense of TAPS these days and what it's providing or lacking? There are a couple of new initiatives that the VA is putting out that I'll mention in a few minutes, but just wanted your thoughts on that.
I do. I hesitate to go too far down this rat hole, or we'll never get off the topic. Just for context, when I left active duty way back in the dark days, something called the Army Career Alumni Program, ACAP, was in its infancy. It was the blind leading the blind. It was within your last week of active duty. Really little or nothing was accomplished. So, by referencing that, things have sprung light years ahead in a positive sense. But they're still, I would characterize it as too little, too late. Even though that they have opened the window, I believe up to 12 or 18 months prior to ETS, you can attend. You can now attend multiple times. I believe you can also bring your spouse, all of which are great ideas. I have any number of continuous improvement thoughts, but it's better than it was. But could be and should be a lot better than it is.
Thank you. Morris, you have not quite gotten there yet. Have you been hearing anything about TAPS and what you should expect from it since you're so close to getting out?
So actually, when you transition from active duty, you are required to go through TAPS. And I went through it in, I want to say November of 2016, and I did not find it useful either. I already had my position. They were trying to teach us how to put together a resume and what you needed to do for interview skills, but the majority of the individuals that were in the class with me had already acquired a position with a corporation as well. So I didn't find it useful at all.
Okay. Well, as I was just mentioning a few minutes ago, the VA has a new program, I think it's called Here for You, where they will be calling every member who transitions during their first year. They say that they're going to call you at least 3 times during that year to check up on you, to see what your needs are, and to facilitate that transition. It's a new program, as I mentioned. I haven't heard any information on its outcomes in terms of whether or not it's being viewed by those who have been reached thus far as something that's helpful. Is it actually facilitating their ability to transition? So I haven't heard any of those things, but that's one of the resources that I put in the box here for those who have joined us and who will look at this later, so that they can at least go there and see. There's also some mention of the traditional TAPS program that the VA provides, along with I think it's 2 different PDFs that they've produced that supposedly go in a little bit more depth and answer questions, et cetera, both for those who transition out of regular military as well as the reserves. So hopefully those things together could provide some assistance. But from some of the things that you all said, it really speaks to a lot of what I've heard Matt talk about in terms of some of the things that he's doing, where we talk about helping one get the resume and all of that information up to speed. Secondly, about not only just this application piece about applying to a job, but applying to a job that really fits, so that you have this tool that matches you and your skills with positions that are open and available. To me, that really speaks to an advancement in terms of how we could definitely help those who are transitioning. Because I'll tell you, even since I was very, very small, before any of this military piece came into play, I can remember reading the Sunday paper, and you see page after page after page of job listings. And then, you'd hear on the news and through other folks that you're talking with about people who needed work. And I always wondered, well, if there are so many jobs, why aren't people in the jobs coming together? And so a lot of what is talked about in the tool that Matt speaks about seems to be addressed to some degree by that tool. So Matt, could you talk just a little bit more about that? Again, I want you all to understand that I'm not trying to get you to do all or anything with the VA, with Matt, or anyone else, but I'm talking through these things because I want to make sure that you have resources, that you have information that can help you make very informed decisions as you move through that process. So
Sure.
Go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Dr. Lewis. And I'll speak to 2 things. One, the base of my company and what we do. And I also want to speak to veteran collaboratives, which I think are key to filling that gap, that lack of a warm handoff from your last duty station to the community in which you're going to settle. So PeerPost is a veteran-run public benefits corporation. We exist not just to make money, but to help society. The co-founders are veterans. The first thing that they did, and we've spent 5 years doing this, is translating every single military MOS, I'll use that term generically. I know there's different terms, Air Force and Navy, but down to its underlying competencies and skills. We went on to do the same for the balance of the U.S. economy, the National Labor Exchange. So 80,000 roles comprising this proprietary database. What you can do as an individual, anyone can go on right now, peerpost.co for free, click create my profile. Literally in less than 15 minutes, you'll have a profile created for free for you for life. 2, access to a knowledge center. Think of it as a talent development curriculum, all for you for free for life, and instantaneous matches to one of 3 million roles rolling through the National Labor Exchange every day, for which you're a match based on your underlying competencies and skills. All right, all for free to the user for life. So 1, it helps with a lot of the translation issues that we've heard talked about. 2, it gets you connected to careers for which you're an actual fit. Again, this all harkens back to my personal passion around what we're doing here. So let me pivot from there to veteran collaboratives and the value that they hold. On my website, matthewjlewis.com, you'll see under resources a link to a list of them. I'll speak to generically about how I would describe this as a business model and how this helps serve the transitioning veteran. And then I'll call out 1 or 2 samples. So let's illustrate this by using the city of Houston, Texas, which I think is number 2, will soon surpass Los Angeles in terms of preponderance of veterans, largest in the country. Houston is home to, I mentioned the 45,000 veteran service organizations before. Houston's home to well over 1,000 of those. If I'm a service member exiting the service, coming to Houston, I'm not going to go knock on 1,000 doors for help, nor am I going to respond to 1,000 knocks on my door. What I will do, same thing I did when I was in the service and transition base to base or post to post, is go to a one-stop, a single location where I can have them take inventory of what my needs are, be they employment, healthcare, finance, housing, whatever it is, and let them reach out to that subset of 1,000 on my behalf, pull those services in, provide them to me and my family at a point, time, place that makes sense for me. That enables me to get up to speed in my community that much more effectively and efficiently. So that's the business model. These are almost entirely nonprofit organizations there to serve you and tend to be located in geographies, regional at best. The one exception that I'll point out is Coda Support Foundation, that's based in the greater DC area, but covers all of those pockets around the country that those individual collaboratives don't cover. So that's the model, and I'm working actively with a nationwide network of those to scale what they do.
Thank you. So at this point, any of you have any other additional comments you'd like to make about what we talked about today? Any points that I didn't ask you about that you'd like to share, so that those who have tuned in, again, can leave with not only the tools that we have in the resource box over there, but you know, tips from those of you who are part of this particular panel. Eric?
Yeah, there's one thing that, you know, that I think is of utmost importance as well, especially when you're transitioning from, you know, military life into the civilian field. And this speaks very well for single soldiers as well, as financial literacy and actually having some sort of a nest egg. So you don't necessarily have to take the first thing that pops up on your plate when you do get out, and you could settle in on a career field that's going to be your career, not, you know, transitioning from 2 to 3 jobs within the first year trying to find your way. You know, financial literacy, actually, you know, stockpiling a little bit, having something to fall back on when you do come out, taking full advantage of your block leave to start compiling components and things that you know, would want to seek out for your career field, doing your research, doing your due diligence, you know, interviewing for as many jobs in that field as possible. But that's something that's often overlapped as well. And I've seen that from time to time. And I don't think that things have changed much either. You know, you hear about, so, you know, I used to hear, you know, I can't wait to get out. I can't wait to get out. But there's little left after that. Well, what are you going to do when you get out? You know, what are you going to fall back on? You know, not just going to, I saw so many soldiers just living paycheck to paycheck and, you know, just waiting for the weekend to get there, for lack of better wording. And that's not how it should be. You should be preparing yourself financially to have something to fall back on. So you're not, I mean, that benefited me tremendously, where I wasn't necessarily pushing and didn't feel the intense pressure to actually produce, where I could take the time and learn my career field and better myself and learn my craft and the ins and outs of everything that I needed to, because I had a small bit of a nest egg to fall back on.
Great, thank you. Anyone else?
And so along those same lines, you know, in the aviation world, we had a saying, proper pre-flight planning prevents poor pilot performance. So, you know, understanding, creating a plan for where you want to go. Not saying you're going to find your passion, you know, a year before you transition out, but, you know, figure out what it is that you're a good fit for. Figure out what makes you happy, figure out what you can wake up and do every morning, and then aggressively go after it. The upskilling that Matthew talked about is a big thing. You know, Eric talked about, you know, soldiers wasting their service time away, waiting for the weekend. And I mean, I can echo that as well. I saw it left and right. And, you know, use those times to gain skills, use your tuition assistance, get another degree, and just prepare for that transition.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I don't mean to interrupt, but you know, that's probably one of my biggest regrets is what Fred was saying, is not using, you know, I look back now and I'm like, man, I could have used my tuition assistance to, you know, possibly, you know, I pick up a secondary CPA certification. It would benefit me tremendously in what I do. So yeah, that's a great point that Fred brings up as well.
Great. I see Matt and Tyrone. So Matt, if you go ahead and then I'll call on Tyrone.
Sure, I'll just mention a couple things. So one, start early. I know for people in uniform, it sounds insane when I'll say this, but I advocate for, and you'll see the timeline in my book, 24 months ahead of time. Start the process, figure out who you are and who you want to be. Simple questions, very difficult to answer, requires a lot of homework, a lot of introspection, but you can't successfully move on to the other questions beyond that until you resolve those. And those are the first 2 chapters in my book. Take advantage of, again, all of these transition programs that are out there. Get boots on the ground early, preferably before you ETS, to prove or disprove your career hypothesis. Network, whether that's through mentors or just directly engaging with people to learn more about the various career fields, and again, prove or disprove those hypotheses. Lots more resources out there today than there were before. I'll point again to my book over here, which will be available at all AAFES and military clothing and sales locations by the end of the summer.
And kind of like looping everything that Fred, Matt, and Eric said. I'd use a soldier's name, but Coons would know who I'm talking about. But I had a soldier who, before he joined the Army, he was bagging groceries. And when he told me he was going to leave the Army, back when Department of the Army was letting us go back home back in July '03, he had no plan, and he was going to go back to bagging groceries. And I tried to get him to stay in. I was like, at least leave with your E5. If you stay in for this deployment, whatever, get the E5, so at least you say you're a sergeant. Because I was like, you don't want, well, beside going back to bagging groceries, but you want your military experience, and this is for the listeners, you want your military experience to be some aspect of a stepping stone or a springboard or step up towards what you want to do. Not, you don't want your service to just be something you did. And we all get out for whatever reason, whether it's retirement or maybe, you know, the Army's not necessarily fit for everybody, right? But just getting out for the sake of getting out is not good enough. You need to have that plan. And it doesn't have to be grandiose, like Fred said, but you got to know, you got to have some semblance of what you want to do, because just getting out for the sake of getting out and then waking up in the morning, you're sleeping on your buddy's couch or back in your mom's house, you just wasted your service. You wasted your time. And that's the last thing we want you to do.
Thank you. Morris, any last words from your perspective?
The only thing I would add to what everyone else has said is read. There are going to be a lot of books out there that will help you with this transition, because it's not just finding the position. It's once you're in that position, if it is the career field you want to learn how to integrate again and also interact with others, right? As soon as we leave, when somebody finds out you're a veteran, they're going to start immediately looking to you, and you're going to represent all veterans because a lot of the civilians don't have interactions with us. And so I would say learn how to adjust by reading books not only on transition, but others out there on how to engage the corporate world as well. And the last thing I'll say is what has been echoed here: get the opportunity while you're still in to get as many certifications in your career field as possible. I know that there are programs out there. You can do TA, you can do any number of GI Bill benefits geared toward getting those certifications, because they will make a difference and you will need them. And remember, you're competing sometimes against peers or younger individuals that have progressed through their schooling, and now they can come on board and they are looking for that entry level. And so learn how to negotiate your salary, right? Your compensation is a little bit different in the military than what it is outside in the corporate world. So read up on that as well.
Okay, ma'am, I'll make one more point, and this might be in Matt's book, and it's not, it'll be in the second volume. Because the internet is what it is today, to the point that Eric was saying before, where you couldn't really go to tabs and use the internet like you wanted to, find someone who you want to be like, who's like you, right? So if you want to be let's say you want to work on Wall Street, you can find a Army veteran who is on Wall Street. You can find a former Army non-commissioned officer or soldier who's working on Wall Street. Find that person and ask them, what did you do to get to where you are? Because to the point I made earlier when Dr. Lewis asked me about my path, people find me who are West Point grads who've gotten out, or NCOs or soldiers or whomever who want to go into politics, and they say, okay, how did you get to where you are? And I lay it out for them so that they can stay clear of the landmines that I had to either clear or stepped on, right? So that you can learn best practices from those people who did it before you.
Well, great. Well, thank you all very much for all of your insights and comments and suggestions about how to best facilitate that transition from warrior to veteran. Again, our guests today were Eric, Morris, Fred, Matthew, and Tyrone. And again, if you would like to contact any of them after this session, please let me know by filling out a form at the Veterans Health and Wellness Foundation website, which sponsored this webinar today. So again, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you all who attended, and I hope you all find this helpful along the way.